She was not the kind of person people noticed right away. If she walked into a room, no heads turned. No one whispered her name or wondered what she did for a living. She blended into the background easily, and most days that was exactly how she liked it. Life had taught her to stay quiet, to take up as little space as possible. Music had always been part of her life, but never in a loud or flashy way. It lived in the corners of her days. In the early mornings when the world was still half asleep. Late at night when everything finally felt calm. She played only when no one was watching, when there was no pressure to impress or explain herself. For her, music was not a performance. It was a place to breathe. That day began like any other. Nothing special about the weather, nothing unusual about her mood. She had gone to the gathering for simple reasons: to be present, to pass time, to feel a little less alone. It was one of those casual events where people talked about work, daily problems, and plans they might never follow through on. Laughter floated around, but it was light and distracted, the kind that fills silence rather than meaning something deep. There was an old instrument resting nearby. It had been there before she arrived, leaning against a wall like a forgotten object. People had joked about it earlier, saying someone should play something. The suggestion was careless, almost a joke. Music was seen as background noise, not something to stop everything for. Someone eventually looked in her direction. It was not because they believed she was special. It was more out of convenience. She had been quiet, listening more than speaking. Someone remembered hearing that she used to play or knew a little about music. The words were spoken lightly, without expectation. "Why don't you play something simple?" Someone said, "Simple." That word landed heavier than it sounded. The room didn't go quiet. No one leaned forward in anticipation. A few people smiled politely, already half distracted. To them, it was just a way to pass a few minutes. A small tune. Nothing serious. She felt her chest tighten. Her hand stayed still. For a moment, she hoped someone else would step in, that the attention would move away from her. She wasn't prepared for this. Not emotionally. Not mentally. Her mind went back, without permission, to moments she rarely visited anymore. Times when she had played before and been told it wasn't enough. That it was too much. Too emotional. Too quiet. Too strange. Music had never failed her, but people sometimes had. She smiled slightly, the kind of smile people use to avoid questions. She almost said no. It would have been easy. No one would have cared. The moment would pass, replaced by another conversation, but something inside her stirred. Not confidence, something quieter than that. A feeling she had ignored for years. The feeling that music was still part of her. Whether anyone noticed or not, she stood slowly, as if afraid sudden movement might break the moment. The instrument felt familiar in her hands, like something she had known in another life. It wasn't perfect. A few marks showed its age. But it was real, honest. People watched now, but casually. Someone checked their phone. Another leaned back in their chair. The expectation remained low. She was grateful for that. Pressure had a way of ruining things. She adjusted herself, taking a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Her fingers hovered, not touching yet. In that pause, the room felt oddly distant. Sounds faded slightly. For a brief second, it was just her and the instrument. She thought about what simple meant. To them, it meant short, easy, forgettable. To her, simple meant honest. It meant starting where the heart naturally went, without trying to impress or explain. She began with a few soft notes. Nothing dramatic, nothing fast. Just enough to form a shape. The sound was gentle, almost shy, like it was asking permission to exist. At first, no one reacted. Conversations continued, though a little quieter now. She kept playing, letting the tune move slowly. Each note felt like a step forward after years of standing still. Her hands remembered what her mind had tried to forget. She didn't look at the people around her. She couldn't. Her focus stayed on the sound, on the feeling in her chest that was slowly opening up. The music wasn't loud, but it carried weight. It wasn't trying to be beautiful. It was simply true. The tune grew, not in volume but in depth. Small changes, gentle turns. Anyone listening closely could feel something shift, though they might not know why. The air in the room seemed thicker, like something important was happening quietly. She wasn't thinking about the audience anymore. She wasn't thinking about judgment or expectations. She was somewhere else, back in moments that shaped her, moments she had never spoken about. The music held them all, without words. A few people started paying attention without realizing it. Someone stopped scrolling on their phone. Another leaned forward slightly. The room began to change, though no one had planned it that way. She continued, unaware of the shift. For her, this was not about stunning anyone. It was about release. About finally allowing something buried to surface, even if just for a moment. The tune remained simple, just as they had asked. But within that simplicity lived years of feeling, patience, and quiet strength. Each note carried more than it seemed. When she played, she wasn't trying to be seen. She was simply being herself, fully, perhaps for the first time in a long while, and without knowing it yet. She was about to change how everyone in that room remembered this ordinary day. As the last soft note from the beginning tune faded into the air, she felt her hands slow down. For a brief second, she thought about stopping. No one had asked for more. The request had been small, almost casual. A simple tune. She had already given that. Ending now would be safe, clean, no questions, no attention. Her fingers rested lightly, barely touching the instrument. Her heart, however, was moving faster than before. The quiet inside her felt louder than the room around her. She could sense the space changing even without looking up. The conversations had dropped into a low murmur. Not silent, but not careless anymore either. She took another breath, deeper this time. She did not know why she continued. It was not a decision she planned. It felt more like something pulling her forward, gently but firmly. The music had opened a door, and closing it too quickly felt wrong. Like stopping a sentence halfway through, her hands moved again, slowly at first. The notes were still simple, but there was more intention now. Each sound came with a memory, though no one else could see it. A small room where she used to practice alone. Late evenings when the world felt heavy. Moments when music was the only thing that understood her without asking questions. She felt a familiar fear rise in her chest. The fear of being noticed. The fear of being misunderstood. Playing alone was safe. Playing in front of people was different. People listened with expectations, even when they claimed they didn't. A part of her wanted to pull back. To return to something lighter. Something forgettable. But another part, stronger than she expected, urged her forward. She had hidden long enough. Her fingers pressed down with a little more confidence. The tune changed, not suddenly, but naturally. It grew more layered, more expressive. Still gentle, still controlled, but deeper. Like water flowing into a wider space. Someone nearby shifted in their seat. Not out of boredom, but attention. A subtle movement, yet she felt it. She kept her eyes lowered, but her awareness stretched outward. She could sense the room waking up. Her thoughts wandered to times when she had been told to keep things simple. In school, at home, even within herself. Simpler was safer. Simpler was accepted, but simple did not mean empty. It never had. The music now carried emotion that words never could. It spoke of waiting, of holding back, of strength built quietly over time. She was not playing fast or loud. She was playing honestly. Her shoulders relaxed as she continued. The tension that had lived in her body for years loosened just a little. Each note felt like a small truth finally allowed to exist in the open. She could hear the room more clearly now. Not voices, but stillness. The kind of stillness that only happens when people are truly listening. No one announced it. No one demanded silence. It simply happened. She felt exposed yet strangely calm. The fear did not disappear, but it softened. She realized that for this moment, she did not need approval. The music was enough on its own. A memory surfaced without warning. A time when she had played for someone who laughed and said it was too serious. The words had stayed with her longer than she liked to admit. That day she packed her instrument away and didn't touch it for months. Now, as she played, that memory lost its weight. The sound in the room felt different. No laughter. No judgment. Just attention. Her fingers moved with quiet confidence. They remembered patterns her mind had long buried. The tune shifted again, adding emotion without becoming complicated. Anyone listening closely could feel that this was not something learned quickly. It carried time within it. She still did not look up. She was afraid that meeting someone's eyes would break the spell. She wanted to stay in this small bubble where the music protected her. The instrument responded warmly, as if grateful to be played with care. Every sound felt fuller now, richer, not because it was louder, but because it meant something. She noticed her breathing had slowed. Her heart still beat fast, but it no longer felt like panic. It felt alive. Across the room, someone cleared their throat softly, then stopped, as if realizing it was too loud. Another person leaned forward without thinking. Phones stayed untouched. Time stretched in a strange, gentle way. She wondered briefly if she was breaking the unspoken rule of the moment. Was she taking too much time? Was this becoming awkward? But the music answered for her. It flowed without asking permission. She allowed herself to add small details now. Tiny changes in rhythm. Slight pauses that held emotion. Nothing flashy. Nothing forced. Just enough to let the tune breathe. Her mind drifted to why she loved music in the first place. It was never about attention. It was about connection. Even when played alone, it connected her to something real. Something steady. Now, that connection reached beyond her. She could feel it even if she could not explain how. It was as if the room itself was leaning in. Her fingers trembled once, just slightly. A reminder that she was human. She adjusted and continued, letting the imperfection exist. It made the sound warmer, not weaker. She thought about stopping again. The tune had reached a natural pause. Ending here would still feel complete. But something inside her whispered, not yet. So she continued. The melody softened, almost like a question. Then it answered itself, gently. It felt like a conversation she had waited years to have. She could feel emotion rising, but she kept it controlled. She had learned long ago how to keep tears from interfering. The music carried the feeling instead. The room felt smaller now, more intimate. Like everyone shared the same quiet space. No one coughed. No one spoke. Even the air felt still. She realized something then. They were no longer listening because they were being polite. They were listening because they felt something. And that realization scared her more than being ignored ever had. Being unseen was painful, but being seen felt dangerous. Her hands slowed again, preparing for another pause. She let the final notes of this section stretch slightly longer, allowing them to settle. In that moment of near silence, she finally lifted her eyes just a little. What she saw surprised her. Faces that had once looked distracted now looked focused, soft, thoughtful. No one was smiling in a casual way. No one looked bored. They looked present. Her chest tightened, not from fear this time, but from something closer to disbelief. She had only been asked for a simple tune, but something far deeper was unfolding. And she could feel it pulling everyone, including herself, into the next moment. She felt a quiet shift in the room, subtle but undeniable. The casual energy that had filled the space earlier was gone. It was replaced by something heavier, yet warm, like the air itself had grown aware of what was happening. People were no longer distracted, no longer fidgeting. Even the hum of the lights seemed to fade into the background. For the first time that day, all attention was hers. Though she had not planned for it, her fingers began moving again, almost automatically. The melody had started simple, gentle, but now it was changing without her needing to think. Small flourishes, subtle harmonies, slight shifts in timing, all coming from a place deep inside her. It was as if the music had taken over, telling a story she had kept hidden for years. The tune grew in emotion, though not in loudness. There was no rush, no drama. It moved like water, slow and deliberate, carving its way through memories and feelings she had long stored away. She felt a warmth spread in her chest, a mix of fear and relief. Playing in front of people had always terrified her, but now she realized it could also heal. She noticed small changes in those around her. One person had leaned in closer, elbows on knees, eyes fixed on her hands. Another had tilted their head slightly, silent but attentive. No one clapped, no one spoke, they simply listened. The silence was not awkward. It was filled with the kind of quiet that only happens when something real touches people. Unexpectedly, the music began to take on a life of its own. She was no longer thinking about the notes. They flowed from her like something she had only just discovered. Every chord, every pause, every tiny shift in rhythm seemed to carry stories of waiting, of fear, of small victories she had quietly celebrated alone. Her mind wandered back to moments she had never spoken about, times she had felt invisible, underestimated, overlooked. Times when she had been told to keep it simple or don't overdo it. Music had been her companion in those moments, the only witness to her thoughts and emotions. And now, playing this simple tune, she realized she had brought those moments into the room with her. She felt a shiver run down her spine. The thought that people were not just hearing, but feeling the music was overwhelming. Some might not understand why the tune moved them so much, but she didn't need them to. She only needed to continue, to let the music speak. Her fingers danced lightly across the instrument. She added small, unexpected twists to the melody, gentle crescendos that built just enough to catch attention without being overpowering. Each note seemed to stretch longer, as if time itself had slowed down to watch. She realized she had forgotten fear entirely. The audience was there, but it no longer mattered. This was about her, about the music, about truth in its simplest form. She noticed a subtle change in her posture. Her shoulders, which had been slightly hunched in hesitation, relaxed. She lifted her head slightly, enough to see the expressions of the people around her. Faces were still focused, quiet, almost mesmerized. Their eyes weren't judging, they were absorbing. And that made her feel seen in a way she had not experienced before. The tune began to shift again, this time carrying a gentler sorrow. Not sadness meant to wound, but the kind that reminds people of shared struggles and hidden stories. She realized she had touched on a feeling everyone knew but rarely admitted, the quiet weight of life that people carry in their hearts. A few people blinked rapidly, quickly turning away to hide tears. Others leaned forward, unable to resist the pull of the music. Someone's hand rested lightly on the arm of a chair, fingers tapping unconsciously to the rhythm. Even without words, she could feel the room responding. She was no longer just playing. She was connecting. The melody grew more intricate now. Simple harmonies layered over the original tune, subtle shifts in tone creating moments of tension and release. She felt the story of her life intertwining with the moment in front of her, a bridge between private memory and shared experience. Music had always been a refuge, and now it was a gift. Her chest swelled slightly, a strange mixture of pride and vulnerability. She was proud of her skill, but more than that, she was proud that she had the courage to share something so personal. Vulnerability had always been frightening. She had hidden herself behind silence and smallness for years. But the quiet intensity of this performance was different. She didn't stop. She could not stop. The music carried her forward, each note a statement, a small confession. She played softly, yet powerfully, revealing layers of emotion that words could never capture. And the room listened, utterly captivated. She noticed a few people exchanging glances, subtle nods acknowledging the depth of what was happening. No one whispered, no one interrupted. They didn't need to. Her music was speaking for her, and everyone understood. Even those who had expected only a simple tune were surprised. They had not anticipated depth, emotion, history, or honesty. And yet, here it was, unfolding note by note. Time began to lose meaning. Moments stretched into what felt like hours, but in reality, it was only minutes. She was aware of this, yet she did not care. The music had pulled her fully into its current, and she was powerless to resist it. She played not for applause, not for recognition, but because it was the only way to express the truth she had carried silently for so long. Small imperfections appeared in her playing, slight hesitations. Gentle slips in rhythm, but rather than detracting, they added authenticity. The music felt alive, human, and relatable. People could feel that. They didn't need perfection. They needed honesty. As she was giving it freely, a soft gasp escaped someone near the front, barely audible but unmistakable. The room collectively leaned into the sound. The energy shifted again, heavier this time, full of quiet awe. She didn't break her focus, but inside, a flicker of realization warmed her. She had underestimated the impact of her own music. She allowed herself a tiny smile, barely noticeable. The tune had started as a simple melody, almost shy in its simplicity. But now it had transformed into something more. Something that connected every person in the room without needing words. Something that made ordinary people feel extraordinary. Her fingers moved with more freedom now, weaving gentle variations into the melody. She played faster in short bursts, then slowed down again, creating a rhythm that felt alive. She felt her heart sinking with the tune, every pulse matching the highs and lows of her music. Memories surfaced again, but she did not push them away. She welcomed them. She welcomed the years of quiet practice, of private moments, of self-doubt overcome. Every memory became a note, every emotion a chord. And every person listening, even without knowing the details, felt it. The room remained silent in its attention. No one spoke, no one shifted uncomfortably. They were there with her, witnessing her, feeling what she felt, if only for a few minutes. She realized that this was the rarest kind of connection, human, raw and unspoken. She continued, her hands flowing over the instrument naturally, no longer thinking about the music itself. It was no longer a task or a performance. It was a conversation. Between her and the music, between her and the people, between what had been hidden and what was now revealed. The tune softened once more, returning to a simplicity that mirrored the beginning but felt entirely different. It was richer, fuller, deeper, not because of the notes themselves, but because of everything that had been woven into them. The room held its breath as the last notes lingered. Trembling in the air like something precious and fragile, she paused finally, letting her hands rest. The silence that followed was heavy with awe. No one moved, no one spoke. For a long moment, it felt as if the room itself were breathing, collectively, in response to what had just happened, and in that quiet she realized something profound. She had been asked for a simple tune, but she had given them something more. Something alive. Something that could not be captured by words, yet everyone understood. Something that mattered. She sat still, heart racing, knowing that the moment she had created would linger in the minds and hearts of those present for a long time. She had played not to impress, not to perform, but to reveal a truth she had long kept hidden. And that truth, simple in origin but profound in impact, had reached them all. The room stayed quiet for a long moment after she let her hands fall from the instrument. It wasn't an awkward silence. It wasn't the kind that demands someone to speak just to fill the space. It was different. Heavy, soft, almost sacred. People didn't know exactly what to say, and maybe that was because they had never heard anything like it before. A simple tune they had asked for, but what they had received was more than that, something alive. Something that touched the edges of their own hearts without them even realizing it. Slowly, awareness returned. A soft intake of breath here, a whispered sigh there. People began to notice each other again, but not to break the spell. They were sharing the weight of the moment quietly, exchanging looks that said more than words could. Some faces were wet with tears, though no one acknowledged them. It was too personal, too real to announce. Yet the feeling was visible, raw and undeniable. Her chest still pounded. She hadn't realized until now how much energy had gone into just being honest in that space. Standing there in front of all those people, she had done something she never thought she could. She had let herself be seen in a way that didn't require explanation or apology. That was something entirely new. And yet the reactions made it feel like it had been worth every second. A few people slowly began to clap, hesitant at first, as if unsure whether this was allowed. Then others joined in, and soon the applause grew not loud or flashy, but steady, warm, and heartfelt. It was the kind of response that carried a different meaning than excitement or entertainment. This was acknowledgement, respect, gratitude for something that had been offered freely, honestly, and without pretense. Some eyes stayed on her longer than others. They were not just noticing her skill, they were noticing her courage, her authenticity. They realized that playing an instrument well was only part of it. What truly mattered was the way she had chosen to share herself in that small, intimate moment. She had risked vulnerability, and that risk had changed the room. She tried to smile, but it felt strange, awkward, almost fragile. She had been hiding for so long that the idea of being openly appreciated, not for perfection, but for truth, felt almost foreign. The music had said things she couldn't yet put into words. And now, seeing how it moved people, she felt a strange mix of relief and disbelief. Someone near the front finally spoke, voice low and careful. That was beautiful. It was the simplest possible sentence, but it carried everything. No exaggeration, no over-the-top praise, just honesty. And in that honesty, she felt a connection forming. She had touched someone's heart. And just like that, one voice became two, then three, and quietly, people began sharing their feelings about the music. A few people whispered among themselves, sharing what they felt. Some nodded at each other knowingly. One person admitted softly, "I've never heard anything like that before." Another simply said, "It made me think of life, everything I've been holding inside." She listened without speaking, letting the words wash over her. They were not seeking attention. They were reflecting the truth of what had been offered. And in that she found something rare, a moment where honesty, music, and humanity intersected perfectly. For the first time in years, she felt seen without having to explain herself. She realized that her quiet life, the hours spent alone with music, the choices to stay small in public spaces, it had all prepared her for this. All that practice, all that patience, all that solitude had built something that could reach others without effort. It was a reminder that preparation doesn't always look like glory. Sometimes it looks like quiet persistence. A few people approached her slowly, carefully, not to impose, not to demand a story, but to offer their own. One person said, barely above a whisper, "I've never been brave enough to play in front of anyone either. You reminded me that maybe I could?" Another shared that the tune reminded them of someone they had lost, someone who had loved music quietly, privately. She nodded, unable to speak immediately. The music had carried her story into theirs, and now their stories were spilling back into hers. It was overwhelming, beautiful, and terrifying all at once. She realized that human connection worked in mysterious ways, sometimes silent, sometimes through a few notes played softly in a room, but powerful enough to change perspective. The energy in the room slowly shifted from awe to warmth. People started smiling, but softly, naturally. No one was rushing to leave or to comment loudly. They lingered, savoring the moment. Some glanced at the instrument, now resting calmly, and then back at her with quiet respect. The simple tool she had touched had become a vessel for something much bigger than itself. She began to feel a sense of peace settle in her chest, the kind that only comes after years of hiding a part of oneself and then daring to reveal it. She had shared a part of herself she had never dared to put into public view, and people had responded with empathy, not judgment. That realization was almost too much to process. In the following minutes, small conversations sparked among the listeners, all about the music, the feeling it had created, and the honesty of her performance. People were connecting in a way that had nothing to do with their jobs, social roles, or daily routines. For a few minutes, they were united by the experience of witnessing something rare, pure expression. Untouched by ego or expectation, she noticed a few people lingering after others had moved on, wanting to hear just a few more notes. Some even hesitated before speaking, afraid to break the delicate atmosphere. And she understood music had a way of creating moments that words often fail to capture. The pause, the attention, the unspoken respect, it all mattered as much as the notes themselves. She realized then that what she had done was not simply playing music. She had offered an experience, a gift. something ephemeral yet enduring, because it had touched the hearts of people who had been willing to notice. And that realization brought a quiet smile to her lips, the kind that comes when one finally feels the weight of their own worth. Even after the clapping had faded, the energy remained. People carried the feeling with them quietly. Some replayed the tune in their minds. Others reflected on what it had stirred inside them, memories, feelings, small realizations they hadn't yet named. All of it subtle, personal, and profoundly human. She herself remained in a state of quiet awe. The room had changed, she realized, but more importantly, so had she. The act of playing, of sharing, had opened a door inside her that she hadn't known was still closed. And for the first time in a long time, she understood that being visible, being heard, being felt, it was not frightening if done honestly. It was freeing. As people slowly began to leave or return to their conversations, she felt a lingering warmth in the space. She looked at the instrument, now resting quietly as if it too had absorbed the weight of the moment. She realized that music had done more than express her feelings. It had created a bridge between herself and the world. However briefly, and that bridge would remain. Invisible but unforgettable, she remained seated for a while longer, letting the energy settle. The realization that she had not only played a tune but also touched hearts, inspired reflection, and reminded people of the value of quiet persistence filled her with a deep, steady satisfaction. The world had noticed her, not for being loud or flashy, but for being authentically herself, and in that, she found the truth she had been seeking for years, that sometimes the simplest acts, when done with honesty and courage, can have the most profound impact. The room had been ordinary before she played, but it would not be ordinary in memory. People had witnessed something rare, a quiet person, a simple tune, and the extraordinary result of authenticity expressed through music. It was a moment she would carry quietly, privately, yet forever. A reminder that even in ordinary places, even when unnoticed, courage, honesty, and expression can change everything, one small, heartfelt action at a time.